All right. Welcome, everyone, to another episode of the Mindgasms podcast. We're going to talk to Adam Hansen again today from Mixed Mental Arts about his experience with Mormonism, because I know we've touched a little bit before on the fact that you used to be Mormon and go on Mormon missions. So I'm looking forward to hearing more about that, and I figure we could also just talk about religion in general and the sliding into atheism for people who tend to leave their religions too. And yeah, why don't you just say a little bit about yourself there to start off with?
Excellent, Andrew. Thank you so much. Always a pleasure to speak with you, good sir. I love your inquisitiveness, your openness, and your willingness to disagree agreeably. So I'm always up for something like this. I think life is too short not to have more great conversations with good people.
Thanks,
So, man. Yeah, absolutely. I think you're doing some great work. I'm a not just an occasional guest, but very much a fan of the show.
Awesome.
So I grew up out west, born in LA. We moved around, ended up in Idaho. I'm grew up fourth generation Mormon. My great grandpa was the original convert and immigrant to the United States from Denmark.
Oh, wow.
And that was back at the time where the mainstream Mormon church was still practicing polygamy. So I do actually have that in my history. I actually came from he had 4 wives. I came from wife number 2. He had he had 4 wives, 28 kids, and about 165 grandkids.
Holy shit. Wow.
Yeah. And then in my generation, I don't know if anyone's, I haven't heard the count, but just conservatively, Mormons have big families. If you take 165 times 5, you're getting well up there, starting to knock on the door of, 4 figures.
Yeah. When was it that polygamy was outlawed?
So it was, Mormons won't say it this way, but they're still a territory, and they were really interested in statehood, and they weren't going to become a state until they quit practicing polygamy. So it was 1880. The Mormon pioneers went out to Utah and landed in the summer of 1847, and so 33 years later, they're trying to become a state. And so, yeah, the prophet of the church at the time, the leader of the church is called the prophet or the president. And he ostensibly had a revelation where God told him that polygamy was no longer necessary.
It's like how one of the prophets had a revelation that black people are okay in the church now.
Yeah, only 14 years after civil rights legislation in the federal government here in the States, so God sometimes a little slow getting the message about what, evidently.
Yeah.
So anyhow, I grew up, was very active, as for those in your audience who know, young Mormon guys, most active young Mormon guys serve a mission for the church when they're 19. They've lowered it now to 18 because I think they're losing too many people even in that 1 year between graduating from high school and going on a mission. But I went to Ecuador and served my time there. Of course, learned Spanish, had just a great experience. Really, really wonderful experience. It was an eye opener culturally. I was this naive kid, and for any of your audience who has actually seen the play, The Book of Mormon, I actually relate very much to these really sweet, naive kids coming out of Utah and the Intermountain West mostly, and then going to a third world country, and no matter how much they think they're prepping you to confront some of the things that you're gonna see there, there's just no way you're really you can be prepared for it. And, you know, I saw my first dead baby, you know, 2 months after landing in Ecuador.
Holy shit.
I mean, it's not like I saw that all the time, but you see that and you go, oh wow, we're dealing with a very different thing here. And it was so shocking that the guy I was working with and I were just, I mean, it was just horrible. And we, you know, as soon as we left the house after checking what can we do, how can we help, you know, our funeral arrangements being made. This is a family we were teaching. They were taking the lessons, you know, from us. But as soon as we got away from there, we're two kids. I was 19. He might've been 20. Yeah. He was the senior companion. And we just started laughing because it was so like, like just nervous laughter because it was so ridiculous. It was so horrible.
Yeah.
And you're a young kid and you're just not prepared to deal with anything like that. But it was really a wonderful experience. I really grew to love the people of Ecuador. I got to spend 6 months up north of Quito, 2 hours north, in a place called Otavalo, where the Otavaleño Indians live. And they're the people that you might still see in some major metro areas. They're the guys with the long ponytail, with the white pants, the dark blue poncho, the flat brimmed felt almost kind of cowboy hat type thing, playing the pan flute or their version of the mandolin, which is called the charango, and singing
What's the pan flute?
The pan flute is it's got reeds. And they're stacked of various lengths, and they're kind of bound together. And
okay.
You blow on it like that, and each reed is a different length, so therefore a different note.
Okay.
And it's really this really great haunting sound. So the main you know, group setup was pan flute, charango, guitar, and maybe like a bongo, just for a basic beat. But that was wonderful, and I learned just enough Quechua to get in trouble as well. Their language, which is the remnant of you know, the Incan language.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, so that was really fun. They were wonderful, and so I spent most of my time there, you know, up in the Andes, up above, you know, 7,500 feet or so. And it was absolutely gorgeous. I took my wife there for our 10th anniversary, and she absolutely loved it. We spent a couple weeks down there. But so that's just a little bit of my background. But I'm happy to discuss whatever you think would be interesting.
Cool. Yeah. I don't know if I don't remember whether I told you this before, but my brother's girlfriend, she comes from a heavily Mormon family, and I don't think that she went on a mission or anything like that. But is that a thing that traditionally only men do, or do women do it too?
There's much more pressure for a guy to do it. Women can, but there's not nearly as much pressure on them. There's more pressure on them. Well, there's pressure on the guys too to get married once they get back from their mission. But right. It's not uncommon still for Mormon women to get married when they're like 19 or 20. Right. My wife and I, we fell right in line. I was 21 and she was 19 when we got married.
Oh, wow.
So
I was just an immature idiot when I was 19. I can't imagine being ready to get married.
Well, that's you know, I don't know that. I mean, I will say for guys, I think there's a certain maturation that comes with, you know, going on a mission for 2 years. And so I came back. So I went back then. You'd go if you're going to college, you'd go to your freshman year, go on your mission, and then come back as a 21-year-old sophomore. So And
So
so
that would
that's,
count as a year of school?
what's that?
So that would
No,
count
no,
as
no,
a
no,
year of
no.
school, or?
No, it wouldn't count as school. It's just that you took your first year and then you spent 2 years, and now you're coming back and you're a sophomore, but you're 21.
Oh, okay, okay.
Yeah, yeah. And so I think I was probably, yeah, I was still plenty immature, but I think I was more mature at 21 than I would have been had I not had this experience. I mean, I had some real responsibility. I worked in the mission office for a while, and as a as a yeah, I was still 19. So as a 19-year-old, I was a missions liaison with the Ecuadorian government,
Oh, wow.
and I worked with our lawyer and everything. If there were any hassles on visas or any kind of immigration issue, yeah, I was the guy who handled that. I was kind of like the quartermaster for the mission, working directly with
Okay.
our mission president and everything. And so, as a 19-year-old kid doing stuff like that, yeah, it was fun, it was weird, it was interesting.
Wow.
Yeah,
I bet that much of a great experience and that much responsibility and personal growth and personal success at a young age rather. I bet all of those factors contributed to you being that I don't want to say I think embedded is the wrong word, but embedded into that religion so deeply for such a long time. Do you think that's true?
yeah. There is. I can't remember who talked about this first, but there's the notion that it's kind of like the investment theory of belief. The more you sacrifice for a belief, the more adherent you're going to be to it, because now you have to explain to yourself why you did that. Like what? Like, I mean, this thing really has to be true if I'm doing all this, or else, what am I doing?
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I
So
mean, like,
there is a certain I've been studying cognitive biases now for about a decade, and one of the main ones is confirmation bias. This idea that once you decide something, you may think you're being fair and that you're open to disconfirmatory evidence, but you're not. And I mean, by default, you're not, and you're going
yeah.
to privilege information that supports where you already are, and you're going to somehow figure out how the disconfirmatory evidence doesn't really apply to this particular situation because of X, Y, and Z, or whatever that
Right.
is. And so much of this really is an exercise in just quadrupling down on confirmation bias.
Right. Yeah, that's hard for all of us to get over from time to time, I think. Like I feel that in myself when I guess particularly when I'm getting into like unnecessary political debates and stuff like that. But yeah, I can see how that can be a huge factor. Um so so how long, I don't remember, I think you told me before, but how long were you a Mormon, and what was there anything specific, or were there multiple specific things that led to you starting to question your beliefs about it, or was it a more gradual process, or how did that happen?
That's such a great question, and it's almost impossible to answer, but I'll give it my best. I'm just personality wise and by profession, I'm an innovation guy. I challenge assumptions for a living. I only kind of joke that my clients pay me to throw Molotov cocktails into their established structures, and just kind of wreak some havoc and see what we can build out of the mess. But that's what I do, and personality wise, I know it. Something like the Myers-Briggs personality, Myers-Briggs type inventory has been a little discredited. But for those of you familiar with it, I am the Myers-Briggs type that is called the inventor. I am an ENTP, so extroverted, intuitive, thinking perceiver.
I'm pretty sure that's exactly the same profile as me.
Yeah. Well, maybe that's why we get along so well. But this is just kind of who I am. It's who I think it's who I've always been. And so I'm very lucky to be in a career where the distance between who I am and what I do is really minimal. I really am very fortunate. I really love what I do. And so, the fact that it took me so long to kind of figure out that things weren't really working for me in the church is just a kind of, it's kind of a tribute to acculturation and my own, denseness. But I was in my late 30s. I mean, I started to become only slightly less orthodox, probably 5-6 years before that, just because, I was really getting going on my career. We were starting to have kids. I was trying to be a good husband, a good father, a good employee, and a good church member. And the Mormon church asks a lot of people because it's a lay clergy. And so there's no professional clergy. All church members have a responsibility. And I spent
there are no ordained ministers?
There are ordained ministers, but they're not paid. They're just members of the congregation.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
How do they make a living?
You have a day job.
Oh, wow.
So even when I was the leader of the men in our congregation as what was called the elders quorum president, I was spending at least 10 to 12 hours a week on that, while still working 55 to 60 hours a week on my job. Okay. And then at the same time, I'm also trying to be, we're starting to have kids. I'm trying to be a good dad and be a good husband and do all of it. And it just started to become a bit nuts. And I just really got to this point where I started thinking, hey, I've really got to get some clarity myself on what are the real non-negotiables about this church. And I'll totally focus on them. The negotiables, I'm just going to have to let go. And I'm not going to worry too much about hyper orthodoxy or anything. I'm going to do my responsibility. I always believed that if I had a responsibility in the church, and we Mormons believe that those responsibilities come to you through inspiration of, the other leaders, in the congregation and everything. And so I really took that to heart. If I was serving in a particular role, I thought, hey, God wants me doing this now, and wants me doing it. So I'm not going to wait around to take a whole lot of direction from other people. I'm the one who has the ball right now. I'm going to go do it.
Right.
And so
that aspect of your experience right there, where you were talking about how you were getting busy with your life and having to still be so heavily involved with the church at the same time started to interfere. That actually sounds similar to what happened with my brother's girlfriend with her experience with Mormonism, because she was in kind of similarly when she was going to college, where my brother was, the Canadian College of Performing Arts. That it's a theater school.
Yeah.
Their workload was so heavy, and it takes so much time when you're going to college or university, that she didn't want to have to keep still going to church every day and praying like multiple times a day and being heavily involved with the church and stuff like that. And her parents were really overbearing and trying to like checking up on her every day to make sure she kept going and stuff. But partially that, in combination with starting to date my brother, who at the time, like me, he isn't one anymore, but at the time he was a militant atheist. Those factors kind of started to impact her, so she gradually kind of changed in what sounds like a similar way and for similar reasons.
Well, yeah, and so then, the Mormon church makes some pretty big claims about its history, about its founding, about being the church, being the right church, and all this. And this internet thing comes along, and you can now if you have questions, you can actually go online and actually find people who also have questions. So for a while, I was kind of a questioning but still active Mormon, and then just bit by bit, it just quit working for me, and it was tough. I mean, Mormonism, I think, more than many religions, is so all-encompassing. It's not just the church you go to. It's so integral to who you are. There are major issues of self-identity that go with it, and so that if you leave it, well, then who are you? You know.
Right.
And so that took some work to try to figure out, to kind of negotiate. Well, if I'm not that guy, Adam the Mormon, anymore, who am I, and what's my role in this big life thing, you know?
Right.
So that was hard, but actually a very oddly enough, it was kind of a weirdly enjoyable effort to try to figure that out.
Okay. So did it feel really, I guess you were kind of just talking about how it felt really difficult at the time. So what, like, was it more, did it kind of come in stages where it was really difficult at first and you didn't know what to do, but then when you started trying to figure out what to do, it made it more fun and less emotionally difficult, or was it kind of those two things combined, or how did that work?
It was all of the above.
Okay.
It was hard. It had its moments of excitement, because as you know, other things would come to me. I started reading just an absolute ton, and so I said, look, if I'm giving up all these particular practices, you know, prayer as a Mormon, reading the scriptures, doing the 10 to 12 hours a week of service that I'm doing and everything, I thought those, in general, you know, kind of the broad view of some of those things, those are still good things. So how can I still be of service? How can I still have some sort of practice that gets me out of my kind of own? And then I started reading, you know, some Zen stuff and everything. And I really resonate with the notion of, you know, the Buddhists speak of egoic contraction, like how you get caught in your ego and you just become this shriveled little, and you kind of erect all this protection around you and everything. And I really got that, and I saw that I had, I wasn't immune from that as an active Mormon. I hadn't been, and I hadn't really been exposed to that idea quite that way. And so I was really very interested in doing whatever I had to get just out of my own, you know, ego-centeredness, that egoic contraction, and really, you know, you start asking questions like, okay, so what is this thing all about? You know, why am I here? And what should I be doing? And what kind of contribution can I make now? So those questions were all very, very important to me. And, you know, if I don't believe in certain things literally now, so, okay, I can now kind of hold some of these things objectively. I don't so identify with them anymore. So now I can actually get some perspective on them. I can objectify them instead of subjectifying them by just having them inside me. So that was just kind of interesting to go through all of that and say, okay, objectively now, what do I want to do? And what can I do on a regular basis still to get out of my own, just out of my own head, out of my own egoic contraction. So meditation was very helpful. I also, you know, I as a Buddhist say, I do have, I continue, but I think I'm a little bit better at it. But I had always kind of wrestled with what the Buddhists call monkey mind. You know, just thoughts, just fleeting all over. I have a very active mind.
Yeah.
And I think I'm probably undiagnosed ADHD or something, you know. So meditation has actually been very helpful. uh, some of my greatest fears, like when I thought, you know, I met my wife at BYU, at Brigham Young University. We got married in the Mormon temple. We had all these kind of agreements about how we were going to live together, how we were going to raise our kids and everything. And so even the question of, will we remain married, you know, kind of came up. And so a lot of fear, as much of it proved to be unfounded. I really found out how just really great my wife is. And so, yeah, we've managed that. And she's not really active in the church now anymore either.
Okay. I like what you were saying about meditation there. It's meditation has helped me a lot too. I guess I might have first heard about it from Tim Ferriss, and I also heard about it, interestingly enough, from Sam Harris, from one of his newer books, Waking Up.
Oh, Waking Up. Well,
Yeah.
he even speaks of it in The End of Faith.
Yeah.
He actually has a chapter on spirituality in The End of Faith, and he took a lot of flack for it from, you know, some atheists. You know, like what you can't,
calling him like an atheist, a Buddhist.
You can't like you can't be an atheist and have an interest in spirituality. Like, why we there's this confusion about terms.
Yeah.
And that's fair. And it's probably reasonable for someone to call out what his or her operational definition is of particularly loaded language.
Yeah.
And so that's fair. But I love where Sam has gone with that. And so even seeing that, you know, his book, The End of Faith, was really important to me when it first came out. Now, I haven't netted out, I haven't drawn some of the same conclusions, and I felt no need to call myself an atheist. I don't think of myself as an atheist. I'm not sure I think of myself as a theist either. When I'm being overly cute, and this is just being so dumb, but sometimes on multiple choice surveys, you'll have A, B, C, and then D will say N/A, like not applicable or whatever. I say that I'm an N/A theist. It's just not. The construct isn't applicable to me. I don't buy into it. I think it's a worn out construct that has caused more friction and argument than it just is. I just don't see it as being all that helpful. But that's just my take. And a lot of people who have, you know, you meet up online, you find people doing the same things, going through the same issues you are. So I have a lot of friends who have gone through this journey as well. And many of them have headed straight to atheism. And when I've been able to, you know, have a moment with them, and I wasn't just being snarky online or anything, and usually more kind of one-on-one, if the time is right, I might ask them if their rush to go from faithful Mormon to atheist, if that wasn't in some way just still trying to find this surety,
yeah,
but just in a photo-negative way.
Yeah.
And the fact is, I just don't. I don't need the answers. I'm fine. I think it's unanswerable. So to spend so much time fighting about it and trying to persuade people about it and everything, there's just so much more we can do with our energies that I think is just far more productive.
Yeah. That's I think we've probably excuse me. I think we've probably talked about this before, but I think I've probably arrived at really similar conclusions as you about questions of whether God exists or not and stuff like that. And I would say I still kind of label myself as an atheist just because I don't believe that any gods exist. For one thing, I think it's phenomenally unlikely, and for another thing, I think more importantly, I don't feel that I don't feel that sense of faith that some people have, that they feel a presence. Like when I talk to my mom about this, for example, she feels like there is a presence of God, and I can't disprove someone's feelings. So I also often say that I don't know that no gods exist, and I can't prove it. And often even militant atheists like Sam Harris and Richard Dawkins say that they can't prove that no gods exist. They just think it's phenomenally unlikely. But because I don't claim to know, some people sometimes label me as agnostic, and I used to kind of have a problem with that, but I don't so much anymore, because like you were saying, it doesn't really matter as much as it used to me, because it doesn't really have any impact on my life. Like when I was a really militant atheist, I would always try to argue with not just like random people who I didn't know, but like if I knew people, I would just always be arguing and trying to convince them that they're just fucking delusional or some shit like that. And yeah, but I think we've talked before too about how I was raised in a Christian family, but I wasn't my experience wasn't that much like yours at all. Like I wasn't really heavily involved, even though my parents were Christian ministers. They had much more of a progressive view, like small p progressive view of religion, I would say. Like they thought, I think they were they would preach that God, well, they wouldn't preach, but they believed that God is a woman. And my mom was just telling me the other day about how in the small farming town where I was born, where they were preaching at the time, both of them preach from the pulpit that there is no physical real devil, which which is a pretty radical thing for that area. But yeah, I would say that
Wow.
it's yeah, I would say that it wasn't religion that drove me into atheism. I would say it was that I already wasn't like that devoted to my religion, and finding out about Sam Harris and then starting to learn about philosophy in terms of religion and stuff like that. I think that that was around the time that I first started to actually get interested in learning, whereas when I was a kid in school, I never really was that interested in learning at all, because I got this mindset from school that it was boring. So I think it was that in combination with being exposed to atheism that just gave me this sense of surety that you were talking about. Like, oh shit, I've been lied to all these years. All these people need to be convinced. I need to go around evangelizing just like a Mormon would do.
That's right. Well, and honestly, that was part of my thing. Also, I felt like I had already given my lifetime's worth of proselytizing, and so I love having these conversations, but I'm not interested in persuading anyone of anything. I offer whatever I think might be of value. I'm interested in hearing what they might have that might be of value, etc. But okay, so God is one thing where, first of all, just from denomination to denomination, even within mainstream Protestantism, there are differences, and even on an individual level, the individual kind of definition of what God is. Mormons were very literal, that God actually was someone who had been through the same experience that we're going through now, and had lived on a different planet earlier.
Oh, right. What's that planet called?
Kolob.
Kolob, yeah.
Yeah. And so God was actually a resurrected, perfected, exalted man, and I think at least I know a lot of Protestant, and I think many Catholics just think of God as spirit. And when you talk of God the Father, and there's depiction of old dude with gray hair and a beard and everything, that's a metaphor. That's just kind of a concretization of that idea.
It kind of seems like seeing God as a metaphysical presence is more common, I would say. Yeah.
Yeah. So I go with that, and then, well, what is actually the feeling of that? And I think our good buddy Jonathan Haidt actually gives, points to something that I try to connect, that I think that I get. And Mormons, also still believed in a Godhead, God the Father, Jesus Christ, and the Holy Ghost, but as three separate and distinct personages, one in purpose, but not one in essence. The notion of the Trinity still just kind of blows my mind. Come on, what?
God is himself and his son, and he sent his son, who is also himself, to get killed, and the son.
And you can know that what the son is saying is true by this virtue of this third guy who's also part of me as well. And yeah. So Mormons talk about, the conversion process is this notion, and Mormons go through it themselves. So you just don't go convert people as a missionary, but every Mormon also is supposed to kind of develop a testimony and have a faith experience. And so Mormons talk about feeling the Spirit. And so what is that? What is that feeling? I certainly felt it as a Mormon. Some of the language the Mormons have is kind of the burning in the bosom, this warm feeling, in your chest. It's very expansive. It really, what I like about it is it really does get you out of your own, egocentridness.
That sounds like the feeling of meditation when it's going really well.
Absolutely. And so I don't know if you know much about Jonathan Haidt's background, but he started off as a psych professor, and one of the first things he did was become an expert in the emotion of disgust, and he became like this world-renowned, disgust expert. And so he knew more about the emotion of disgust than anyone.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, and he said after 8 years, he got disgusted with disgust, and he started to get interested in. He felt like we didn't really have good language for the opposite emotion. It's not really awe. It's not really joy. What is that? And so he started to go to work on this. What's the opposite emotion to disgust? And the term he came up with was elevation. And he said it's the feeling you get when you see acts of altruism being performed. You kind of go, oh man, wow, that's so cool. It's kind of humbling. It's kind of cool. It's kind of tender. When you see an adult being really sweet to a young child, we know what that feeling is, right? And it's really attractive. It's really, it gives you pause. It requires you to kind of do like a quick, at least for me, it kind of it invites me to do a quick kind of self-analysis. And, I think it encourages you to be better, to be more compassionate, to be a bigger person, the moment in Schindler's List when, Oscar Schindler starts doing this moral accounting at the end, when he says, why did I hold on to this pen? I could have sold this pen and saved another X lives, and he'd done all these great things. Part of it was really honestly just to stay in business, but bit by bit he was enticed into a place of moral growth and expansion and compassion. And so those feelings. So Haidt put the language of elevation around that. And I honestly think those feelings are often what a lot of people would just call, that's God. That's kind of the presence of God.
Okay.
And so I think the great thing about this is we can have that same experience, and we don't have to wrap all other kinds of weird beliefs, around it to say that, this is legit.
That's why, like, That's why I like that book, Waking Up, especially because I'm I'm not a militant atheist anymore, but even when I was a militant atheist, when I first read that book, I would say like that, especially in combination with hearing so much about the benefits of meditation from people like Tim Ferriss, convinced me to, even when I was a really militant atheist, start doing meditation. And now I've been doing that for years, and uh, being more open to and interested in religion now I think helps with that a little bit, especially that in combination with meditation, just that sort of mindset of open-mindedness and paying more attention to the reality around you, and not necessarily getting so trapped in your head, and feeling your body too. That's as kind of as kind of unrelated as that can sound sometimes, it kind of helps me understand where people are coming from more, when they're talking about religion, like our friend Hayden Bruce, who we've talked to with Ed about religion.
Well, it's the kind of the broad term that you're describing that I think connects it all is consciousness.
Yeah.
You know, and just having greater, you know, kind of growing into being more conscious, and getting past, you know, we know that our evolutionary, you know, inheritance gives us all this freight, all this cognitive freight, cognitive biases, and kind of these weird things that come pre-installed, you know, in each one of us, and we're really super adaptive for our ancestors. You know, that's why they were selected for. But conditions have changed, and we still have all this baggage, and we're not, and all of that is non-conscious. So until the moment we become aware of them, we learn about them, and then we start, you know, exploring what we can do to get past them and not just be hostage to them. Then, you know, I think that's just a good thing to understand what's going on.
Yeah.
So I think, to me, greater awareness of cognitive biases and kind of this spiritual openness and everything, I think that's all of the piece.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, with meditation in particular, recently also, one of the ways that has really helped me, actually, and like you kind of feel after a while that meditation is the same, and then you kind of plateau, but then it's almost like a workout, because it's kind of like a mental exercise in the way that doing a workout is in the way. I kind of like, I guess I ascended a plateau that I was on recently, and meditation actually helped me a lot with my depression that I have a lot of trouble with sometimes. And it helped me realize that a lot of these negative cascading thoughts that I get a lot of the time, they're just me getting trapped in my thoughts in my own head, as if my thoughts are me and my thoughts are reality. But it helps me realize that I can just be connected with my body more, and be connected with the external world more, and like lift my head up and look around and realize, oh wow, look at this world all around me. And it's really,
isn't that great?
Yeah, exactly.
So there's, I don't know if you've heard of the Buddhist practice of Tonglen.
No, I haven't.
So this is, have you ever heard of the Pema Chodron?
No, I haven't.
Oh, she's great. So she's a Zen abbess, not an abbot, but an abbess. She runs a Zen monastery up in is it up in Nova Scotia or something like that? Either Nova Scotia or PEI or something like that.
Okay.
And she introduced me to this. She has a series of books that I think are just absolutely wonderful. So when I was going through this process of coming out of Mormonism and everything, I was trying to figure things out, and I was feeling so much fear and just conflict and everything. She turned me on to the practice of Tonglen, which just in a nutshell is, it is human nature to flee fear, to get away from it. And Tonglen says, go right into it. And
Yeah.
so you actually, in the practice, you focus on yourself and you breathe in darkness, pain, suffering, all that, the fear, everything that you normally would just run away from. And you spend some time on that with respect to yourself. And then you breathe out to yourself light, peace, compassion, all the good things. So breathe in dark, breathe out light. And you do that for a while, and then when it feels right, then you extend it to your family, or to your, if you're in a couple, or whatever that is, whatever the next unit up from you as an individual is. And you breathe in all the fear and suffering and everything of your family or your couple or whatever, and then breathe out light to that. And then you go to the next level, your neighborhood, your community, and eventually the world. And so you really take on, all that fear and darkness and everything, and actually spend time with it. And what happens is the moment you actually do that, it's actually less powerful.
Yeah.
Because you're not running away from it. You actually come to understand it better. And it still sucks. It's still not fun. But if you're willing to do that work, it actually makes you far more resourceful to get on, at least in my experience. I don't want to preach too much here, but I became far more resourceful to deal with the fear and everything. And anytime I caught myself just trying to ignore the fear or run away from it and anything, I knew that I had to go spend 10 minutes or so at least in doing this practice. And it really helped.
Yeah. Yeah, that sounds like a great idea. I really like that idea in Buddhism of just immersing yourself in negative thoughts rather than trying to push them away and compartmentalizing them, because if you do that, they can just build up. And if you immerse yourself in them, like you were just saying, you can take the power away from them if you just sit with them and then go from that to trying to view it from an external perspective and trying to view the other different kinds of thoughts and the other different kinds of more positive aspects in the world, and just acknowledge that both bad and good things exist in the world, and you can choose which ones you focus on. You can't choose what emotions you have, but you can choose which ones you focus on, and you can accept the ones that you don't like without trying to shove them away, and without choosing to not acknowledge that they exist.
Oh, absolutely. And what I love to do is, so you pull together that from Buddhism, you pull together learning from behavioral science, from cognitive psychology. So like the work of Roy Baumeister on, he and his team wrote this really seminal paper called Bad is Stronger Than Good. That, negative events, people, memories have so much more impact on us than their positive counterparts, because that was helpful for our ancestors. That was, it was a tough world, and it was really important that bad so outweighed good in its effect on them, because then they'd become more averse to it. They'd stay away from it, and that actually then helped them stay alive longer and help them just help them stay safe. And safety was a much bigger issue way back then. But once you understand this, our default mode is not neutral. Our default mode is negative. you know? And so to even try to, so the Buddhists talk a lot about equanimity, right? Can you just, not get overly excited about good stuff and not get overly freaked out about bad stuff? To me, that actually is an advancement over our baseline, because our baseline is negative. And so I think that's so important. And then I think there's also some wisdom in having good perspective. It's not that you're not appreciative of when good things happen. You just don't cling to them so much. You because you're not reacting, you can just appreciate them for their what they are. You can appreciate them in the moment, and you also realize that you'll have more good experiences at some other time in the future as well. And you also know that some bad stuff is going to happen at some point, and that's fine. That's just you know, you just deal with it. And I really like that.
And it doesn't have to mean indifference either. I think people get confused about that sometimes, that if you're saying the kinds of things that you were saying, it means no, you should just be like emotionless all the time. And that's it reminds me of what you were talking about. Reminds me of Stoicism too, which is why I've again, from Tim Ferriss, I've gotten interested in studying that philosophy in the last few years or so. But once you understand the idea of Stoicism, rather than like the common understanding of it, the philosophical understanding is basically exactly what you were describing from Buddhism, which is experience your emotions, whether they're good or bad, but then just try to move on with your fucking day without getting attached to the past and how you feel about things, whether it's a positive emotion or a negative emotion. So it's like not getting overwhelmed by sadness, but not necessarily getting overwhelmed by happiness too, because it can be like it can be a problematic process for the way you process your life. And I like what you were saying too about how from an evolutionary perspective, our default setting is to be negative. That's really important to remember too. I remember from when we were talking about evolution on that Mixed Mental Arts chat, we were talking about what we've heard about from a lot of people before, that it's a beneficial strategy evolutionarily to have a negative default setting, because if you're paranoid, then if you hear or see a rustling in the bushes, then it's safer to assume that there's a fucking lion there about to jump out and try to eat you than it is to assume that there's nothing there.
Well, and then I guess I would couple that with at least some of the most important insights from statistics. And I don't have to become a master statistician. I remember at one point actually studying what a Poisson distribution was for queuing models in operations. And all I remember from that is just what I said, and that's it. But one key thing is just the basic, kind of statistical insight that's helpful, is just to ask yourself how representative the rustle in the bushes being the lion is actually in your life.
Right.
And so the argument for not being paranoid is that we just don't face matters of existential threat daily, weekly, yearly, almost ever. The closest we come is maybe if we've been in a bad car accident, hopefully nothing, worse than that. And so then it's fair to question, hey, I've got these reactions, I've got these instincts pre-installed. They served my ancestors really well. How often are the conditions I face similar to those conditions under which those instincts were formed? And the answer is mostly not that much.
Yeah.
So the metaphor I like to use on that is, we all know that our bodies metabolically are still set up for a reality of caloric scarcity. Our ancestors could go maybe a few days without eating. They had to drink more often. They had to have some kind of water or something. You can't go very long without some water, but you can go 3-4 days without food. You can do it. And so our body stores fat really well. We still are drawn to the most calorically dense foods. We're still, often that is either something sweet or something fatty, or some combination thereof, like a cinnamon roll or whatever. But we now do not live in a reality of caloric scarcity. We live in a reality of caloric overabundance. And there's this great evolutionary mismatch between our metabolism and what we're actually faced with. So the same thing cognitively, there's this mismatch. We have all these scripts ready to run, usually without us even really being aware of them, but we just have very different conditions. And so what we do know is our threat detection mechanism is blunt, and it doesn't do a good job of distinguishing between lion and, oh, Jim didn't like that last comment that I made. You know, so we have the same physiological response. We get the shot of cortisol and adrenaline and everything. Our heart rate starts going up. We might break out in a small sweat, whatever that is. And so we just need to be discerning. We need to understand what default mode is so that we can do something about it. And we can go, oh, okay, I understand why my bodies do that. That's back to this notion of Buddhism, just being able to observe it and go, I understand why my body is doing that right now. That isn't me necessarily. That's just what my body does because that's what it's wired to do.
Yeah. Yeah, I was just thinking about social media when you were saying that, like the lion in the bushes is not the same threat as, oh, I can't believe that guy said that on Twitter. What the hell? I need to lambaste him and destroy him.
Oh, absolutely. Threat. And it's all this blunt threat detection system that doesn't give us, specific tools to deal with lion versus, Twitter flame war.
Yeah, exactly.
And it's just, and we just have to know that we're not, we're wonderful. I'm fascinated with humans, but our default mode is really not really all that wise.
Yeah.
And I say this, what all my study of this has done is not put me in a position of being a judge. If anything, I catch myself more regularly, which I think is a good thing. But I mean, daily, I'm faced with my own frailty in this.
Yeah, me too.
But hopefully I can more often remind myself what's going on and choose something else and choose a different response. And that's the difference between reaction and response. And I want to be responsive. I want to be less and less reactive.
Yeah. Yeah, that's one thing that meditation can help with too, I would say. But like you were saying, everyone is always going to have problems with this, regardless of how much we do stuff like that. And all we can do with that is make ourselves better and more susceptible to responding after kind of analyzing why it is that we're responding. And that can be a huge challenge for sure, like you were saying.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
I wanted to go back. You mentioned earlier, but then we went off in another direction, and not saying that that's not all fun to talk about. Of course,
I love nonlinearity, as you know. So.
Yeah, of course, yeah. Conversation should be like Molotov cocktails.
It should be, man. Fun. Not hurtful ones.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. But yeah, you mentioned earlier when you were kind of questioning your Mormonism more, how you even were talking with your wife about whether you would still be married or not. So I was curious about how you got over that challenge.
Some of this is confabulation. I'm now kind of, it's a rational reconstruction of some very emotional events. But I think largely it was just realizing that we were together because we wanted to be, and even though the church had been kind of the medium through which this all happened and everything, we really loved each other and we really liked each other a lot, and we found real value in being together even with those differences. I mean, and honestly, one of the I think most important things that I discovered was that my wife was just far more understanding and open and everything than I. It's not that I hadn't given her credit for that before. There hadn't been the need to give her credit for that before, because we just had this assumption about us, being good Mormons and everything. What it turned out is that I had actually been the more orthodox, more conservative, and she was for her, the church was, and this, this maybe isn't all that surprising, but for her, much of the value of the church was in the community, in the support. It was a good place to bring kids. The kids get, taught a value structure, and there's just this really nice, loving, so very, very supportive community, and she was never quite as, so the difference between orthodoxy and orthopraxy?
No, I've never
have you heard that
orthopraxy before.
So doxy is about belief, praxy is about practice.
Oh, okay.
So she was a very orthoprax Mormon. I mean, all the behaviors, very, very, she carried out her responsibility in the church really well. She was very dedicated. For years, she was actually, she taught the teenagers in our congregation. And they loved her, and she took it very seriously, and she was a very good level-headed teacher. She wasn't like a nut job like some people, but she wasn't ever, I think, quite, no, not even quite. She was never as orthodox as I was, and she didn't really care. She didn't just care so much about some of the literal, whether some of these things were literally true or not. And she grew up in a family that was much more, they were just more, some of the friends of her parents were more liberal Mormons. Okay. Even though her parents were, pretty orthodox and everything, a lot of their friends were more liberal. I remember getting in some discussion with some of her parents' friends, and I was fascinated by it, but I just thought, how can you be a good Mormon and believe that? Come on. But so, yeah, I think that's part of it. So, I mean, I think that's, if you grow up in a faith, particularly a faith as kind of stringent, as all-encompassing as Mormonism, it's hard for you to tease apart faithfulness to the church and to the doctrines of the church and everything, tease that apart from ethical living. And it's just it's part and parcel. It's all part of the same thing. So it's kind of an interesting question. If you leave the church, how do you construct some sort of compassionate, ethical life for yourself? Yeah. And that's what's been, I think, really actually rather enjoyable.
Okay, so it was easier for your wife to get over these challenges of faith and her beliefs than it was for you because of her background. Would you say that?
I don't know if it was necessarily easier. Again, it was. She didn't have. Yeah, with respect to belief, yes. With respect to practice, it took her a while. I mean, she was still fairly active up until just several years ago. I've been out of the church we're coming up on 20 years now.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah. So I was out for a while, and she was still, taking the kids to church, and I would go sometimes to be supportive, but just increasingly it became, I would get mad when I'd hear things, and I always felt like we actually had to do, damage control with the kids after each Sunday to say, we know you heard this, that's not right. And so for one example, and my wife and I, even, I mean, years ago, realized that the church was wrong with respect to gay people. And I had a gay friend come out to me when we were the same age. We went to high school together. We actually were roommates. 6 of us from our high school were roommates the first year of college before we all went on our missions. And so probably 8-ish years later, somewhere in the mid 80s, I guess it would have been like the late 80s, this friend came out to me. And it was an amazing, I won't go on to all the detail because it really gets into like weird stuff. Like I actually had a dream where in the dream he came out to me, and so I called him up the next day and I said, "Hey, let me tell you about a dream I had last night."
Oh, wow.
And so in that conversation, it hit me so hard, the dream, and then we then had a 3.5-hour conversation about it. And at the end of it, I just said, "Well, I hope you're clear on where I am on this, and I'm with you, and the church is wrong, and I love you. You're one of the best people I know. I refuse to think of you as anything other than just who you are. And you're such a good person, so much better than me in so many important ways." And so, even then, that was even before we had kids, and my wife and I both agreed on that. We talked about it a lot. We just said, yeah, the church doesn't have this right. And so we always raised our kids that way. And our kids just knew we were always very open with our kids on tough issues. I mean, in an age appropriate way. I mean, we weren't talking about homosexuality when they're 5.
Right.
But our kids knew where we were on that. Our kids knew that certain overly rigid, non-compassionate, frankly, sayings from previous leaders of the church and everything just weren't acceptable, now. And so we would talk about it. But so all of our kids knew from a very young age that if they were ever to come out to us, that just was in no way ever going to be a problem, and that we loved them and we wouldn't think of them differently if they came out to us or anything. It's just it's ontology. I mean, it's just who you are.
Yeah.
So there were some of those kind of things like that we didn't bring it up a lot with our believing friends and everything, because a lot of people just weren't there, and there's nothing to be gained. I mean, we didn't hide it. If anyone asked us about it, we'd tell them. But
Okay. So you raised your kids as Mormon at first, but then did you all leave the church like several years later when they were still kids, or like around what age were they?
They all, as they got older, each one of them peeled away.
Okay.
Once they got into their later teen years, our youngest son, I was just talking to him about this a while ago, and he said, yeah, he never really bought in.
Oh, okay.
See, but he was an interesting kid, so that doesn't surprise me. He was super precocious, very sarcastic, not like me in any way. But no, one by one they pulled away, and my wife, even as she continued to go to church, she was very supportive of that. She said, "Hey, it's important that they act according to their own beliefs, and if they don't believe it, I don't want them pretending."
Yeah. That sounds like the similar kind of open-mindedness as my parents in regard to both religion and homosexuality. We both my brother and I have said several times before that it's almost too bad that neither of us turned out to be gay, because we had the parents who would be completely open with it.
Well, our daughter actually did come out
Okay.
when she was 19, and she swears that I had encouraged her to come out when she was 16.
Oh, really?
And I said, that may be how you processed it. I think the conversation was something like, if you or any of you were ever to come out, that would be fine, and we'd love you, and that just wouldn't be an issue. So I think she wondered and everything. She dated some, but it didn't fully surprise me when she came out. I mean, she's not, I mean, I won't make any bad, draw any bad lesbian stereotypes or anything, but she wasn't really into flannel or anything, she was handy with tools, but no more handy than any of my sons or whatever.
Oh, okay. Okay. Yeah.
And she's a great kid, and the fact that she's gay, honestly, I mean, the things that go through, like, how often do I remind myself that my daughter's gay?
Probably not that often.
I don't deny it, but it's about the 57th, least interesting thing about her.
Right.
She's, there's just so many other. She's got a really wonderful girlfriend. We'll see where this goes. We really like her girlfriend a lot. They're a really fantastic couple. I'm very happy for both of them. I'm no less happy for them than I am for our oldest son, who has a wife and has our 2 grandkids, and I know that she wants to be a mom. Our daughter wants to be a mom someday. And I want her living in a society where that's just without question supported, and everyone's fine with that, and no one's given her side eye or anything. She actually said, so we're here in the New York metro area. Within the last year, I think she actually got shit from an Uber driver.
Oh,
because
really?
Yeah, well, she's in the music business, so she has kind of a bit of a I mean, she looks like a music artist, so she has, her hair has been shorter on the side, longer on top, stuff like that and everything. And she, it probably wouldn't be too hard to figure out that she's, gay. And an Uber driver here in the metro area actually gave her some shit about it. And I said, did you report him? Because I guess there are bigots everywhere. In the New York City metro area, I would hope to see much less of that.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, I know one of my friend's sister, only I think a couple years ago, came out as gay too. And it's interesting that like you were saying, there's no, like, a stereotype doesn't encompass what someone is going to be like. With her, for example, she doesn't fit into any of the categories of like what a stereotypical at least what a stereotypical like butch lesbian would be, or anything like that. Like, exactly. She always seems like she has what I guess what you would call the cultural understanding of what a straight woman would be like, but then she likes girls instead of guys. And it's interesting because usually, like, the few girlfriends that I've met of hers that I've seen, they seem to be more of like the stereotypical lesbian, just in the way that they look. I don't really know that much about them personally, so I can't make any judgments about that, or judgment is the wrong word, but yeah, it's interesting.
Hey, I want to sneak in just a quick snippet.
Yeah.
Here's my daughter's latest single.
Oh, okay.
I don't know if you can hear that.
little bit.
So, if you're on Spotify, look up the group Late Guest at the Party.
Oh, okay.
And that's
Oh,
their
I'm glad that you mentioned that. Actually, that reminds me. I didn't tell you this, but my brother and his friend also recently they released their first 2 singles for their band that they called Dope Afternoon, and I think one of them is called Been Crazy, and one of them is called Let's Have Fun. I really like in particular that one, Let's Have Fun. It is the one that where my brother is more involved, but it's really cool. You can find it on YouTube, and I think not Spotify, that other one.
SoundCloud?
Stitcher, yeah,
Stitcher.
SoundCloud, and I think Stitcher, yeah. I really like that one. Yeah,
I'll have to check them out.
Yeah.
So I'm
Cool.
very proud of our daughter. I'm also a musician by hobby.
Oh, and right, I remember.
I've played in bands for most of the last 42 years. I'm very old.
Yeah, I remember you talking about that on I think it was either Hayden's or Eric Hunley's podcast. I don't remember which, but are you still in a band now?
I'm not, and this is actually the longest I've gone without being in a band. It's been now probably close to 3 years now, and it's really driving me nuts because I really enjoy it. I love playing out live. I love the last band I was in was some of the best musicians I've ever played with. And it was just so much fun. I just have to say we sounded good.
That's good.
And it was really a joy. I was with them for about 14 years. It's actually a band we started when I was working at Mars, the candy company.
Right.
And we'd play company events, and then we actually started playing out in the public here as well at one place in particular just down the road from me.
Oh, cool.
But yeah, it's really fun. I still play music a lot. I still, if I'm not on the road traveling or anything, I probably still sit down at the keys or pick up the guitar or get into GarageBand on my Mac at least 3-4 times a week. It's so enjoyable for me. I think it's actually part of my therapy as well. If I go too long without playing, I get cranky.
It's kind of like how writing is therapy for me, I bet.
Yeah.
Like yesterday I was writing the first draft of a short story, and that's one of my favorite things to do. I just let it all come from my intuition, and I'm completely in the moment when I'm doing that. I'm forgetting about everything else.
Oh, that's great. I just picked up a new app on my Mac that's called Flow State that actually has kind of a cool behavior hack to it. You can set the interval for 5, 15, or 30 minutes. But if at any time in that selected interval you stop writing, it goes away.
Oh, okay.
So it really encouraged, this notion that, you should separate the processes of writing and editing.
Yeah.
And it's natural to try to edit as you write.
Yeah.
And this is to say, no, get into flow, just keep writing. And if you make it through the interval, then you can save it.
Yeah. Oh, that's a great idea.
But even if you agree on 5 minutes and you stop at, 4 minutes, 40 seconds, it's gone.
Oh, wow. Yeah, that's a great idea to prevent you from getting distracted, because there's so many ways to get distracted.
Yeah. Well, and including I need to go back and fix that last sentence.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, like I try to do that. Yeah, I try to always do that, especially when I'm I guess when I'm doing my first draft, I just go and I notice something, but then I go, no, I gotta keep with the flow of the thoughts that are coming into my head and edit it when I'm done the first
That's
draft.
right. That's right.
Yeah.
Because I mean, there really is something to that flow state, you know.
Yeah.
And so you're familiar with like Csikszentmihalyi, the psychologist, the
Oh
professor.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
I haven't read his book, but I've read the book The Rise of Superman, which was all about flow states,
Oh yeah,
particularly in
Kotler.
performance athletes, and they mentioned Chick
Yeah.
sent me high in that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I first heard about him when that book first came out, and I just get it, and I think flow states. That's another thing. You know, is that spirituality? Whatever. But I mean, it's an enhanced human capacity, but all the things that are true about it. You get in a flow state, and time dilation happens. You don't know, have I been working at this 15 minutes or 4 hours? You
Yeah.
know, who knows? You know, it doesn't matter because you're cranking and you're operating at such a high level that's so enjoyable. And I love that.
Yeah. Yeah, it's really interesting, the idea of flow states and the number of different activities that can activate it for different people. And it seems to me like it's really just like overpowered intuition combined with overpowered mindfulness and like being in the moment. And like you were saying, you experience man that they were just that many different high extreme sports performance athletes like skydivers and base jumpers and people like that were describing is that they just go they just do what they feel like they're supposed to do at any given moment, because if they question something they could literally die, so they
Yeah,
have
that's
to
right.
rely on their intuitions.
That's right. Well,
Yeah.
and the whole thing there of why practice matters, you know, the whole, you know, skill development or talent development is moving from this, you know, as Kahneman talks about system one, system two thinking. You know, system two is very effortful. It's wherever we start acquiring a new skill. I like to say system two, think of the first time you pulled onto a freeway in driver's ed, you know, just like how, like your eyes, you're actually doing this with your eyes. All your
Yeah.
senses were pressed into full attention. You were hyper vigilant, and it was exhausting. And 15 minutes of that, and you know, okay, enough. And then, you know, the fifth time you do it, not nearly as horrifying. By the 25th time, you're starting to get comfortable with it. You know, when you get older like me, and you've now done it, you know, over 1,000 times, it's now so automatic, it requires no effort at all. And
Yeah.
that's why it's, you know, the whole Anders Ericsson, you know, Gladwell popularized the whole 10,000 hour rule and everything.
Yeah.
That's just a story of effort being pushed into automaticity. That's all that is.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. Yeah. Yeah, to go back to what you were saying about how you and your wife were really open with your children, investigating for themselves and deciding for themselves whether they still wanted to be involved with the Mormon Church and whether they wanted to be religious or not and stuff. That reminds me of how open-minded my own parents have always been too. Like when my brother and I first started to question religion and then went even more extreme into atheism than both of us are now, they had no problem with that, other than when I would get, and my brother too would just get unnecessarily angry about religion sometimes, and just be assholes talking to people from our soapboxes like we're better than everyone else.
Well, there's, I
But
mean, that's part of individuation, and you know, it's also, you know, the whole stages of grief thing. You know,
oh yeah, like the 5 stages, is it?
yeah, something like that. Elizabeth
Yeah.
Kubler-Ross. Well, anger is one of the stages of grief, and
Yeah.
grief isn't just when a loved one dies. Grief is any great loss, right? And so I think for many of us, changing from a religious background, that's a pretty big, powerful thing. And I at least saw in myself some of those stages of grief. And I definitely did go through my angry phase. And I think I also had some self-awareness to know that I wasn't going to stay there.
Right. Yeah,
that
makes
I
sense.
think some people get stuck in that, and it's unnecessary. I wish, for their own benefit, I wish they didn't get stuck there.
Yeah.
Because it's still, you heard the difference. Have you ever heard the term counter-dependent?
No.
So you're not independent as long as you're still reactive to something. You're counter-dependent. You're still dependent on this thing, but in the inverse way. And true independence is where you get to a point of, so I can now be with Mormons. I can now be with most of my family's still back in Idaho, is still very active and everything. And I have no problem being with them, right. And I can even have, discussions about spirituality with them and everything. And it's not all this reactive, horrible thing that it would have been years ago.
Yeah. Yeah, that reminds me of how, like, for example, now I guess I get relatively recently, one of my friends had her first kid, and she's kind of agnostic, I would say, but both her boyfriend and particularly her mom are Christian. And I was hanging out with her one day, and her mom invited me to the baptism of her child. And my friend responded by saying, Mom, he's an atheist. He doesn't want to go there. But then later I said, like, I am an atheist, but it doesn't matter to me. If I'm going to a church, I think there's just nothing magical happen. It doesn't matter to me, but I would go to see your child baptized if you want me to, because you're my friend, because my lack of belief in God is less important to me than your friendship.
Well, that's absolutely right, and I think that's a healthier approach. And I just know too many people who would, even if they went and did that, they'd then see if they couldn't pick a fight while they were there.
Yeah, exactly.
And it's just so beside the point. I mean, come on.
Yeah,
well, we brought this up before, and I'm a broken record, but I just really get into this point where you have to determine whether it's more important to be right or to be effective. Is it more important? Is it more important to be right or to be supportive? Is it more important to be right or to be compassionate? More important to be right or to be a good friend? And the notion of time and place. It's not you have to skirt these issues, but it's just some sense of proportion and timing, and what's the loving move here.
Yeah, that's why, like, this reminds me, because I got into probably relatively pointless debate about politics the other day. I was trying to make this point, but ironically, the same point could apply to me in doing this myself. I was kind of my brother, because he's much more politically progressive than me. He was just he was posting one of these memes that Jim Carrey had posted about blaming Trump for those terrorist bombings, and how if you don't see the malice in how he is directly responsible for these bombings, basically, then you are part of the problem. And I was trying to talk about how a common humanity narrative, like what someone like Martin Luther King Jr. or Daryl Davis talks about, is much more effective than a uniting people against the common enemy narrative, as Jonathan Haidt and Greg Lukianoff talk about in their new book, The Coddling of the American Mind, and how this is a problem with the polarization in our current political landscape. Like the people on the left wing, they're saying things that are preaching to the choir for the left, or the conservatives aren't going to listen to them, and they're just going to get more angry and more likely to support Trump more. Or on the other side, the conservatives will do the same thing, and they'll preach to the choir to people on the right, and then people on the left either aren't going to listen to them, or they're going to get more angry and get more antagonistic toward Trump. And I don't think this spreading antagonism is very effective.
Well, and just a moment's self-reflection kind of reveals, the wisdom of a different approach. And it's simply, when Jim Carrey posted that, I think that probably felt good for him to post it.
Yeah.
Like, oh man, that's great. I'm standing up for my principles and everything. And just simply turning that and saying, when was the last time that you were receptive and open to that kind of approach from the other side?
Yeah, exactly.
And let's talk about that. How'd that go? What was going on? What were you doing right before that? Who were you with? What was the context for that? And then importantly, did it change you in any way? And I think we can already anticipate what the answer would have been to any of that.
Yeah.
And you just go, these folks on the opposite side from you are not constructed so differently that they're going to go, oh, because it's you saying it, I'll listen, because I know you're so reasonable always and everything. And it's just, it's another weird example of egoic contraction. And because I'm feeling it so strongly right now, it must be self-evident for everyone else.
Yeah.
It isn't. Of course it isn't.
And I mean, it's really understandable to be mad at Trump because people who he insulted got bombs. But to me, there's a huge difference between Trump insulting someone and him sending them bombs. Like, it's very different.
Well, and so much of the discussion in political matters, religion, and in any of the tough issues, there's this, and I'll just call it out because I'm tired of it. I think there really is a non-adult binariness to so much of it. And why couldn't someone just say, look, some of the things Trump says is contributory to an environment where bad and deranged people, some fun combination thereof, are going to do some reprehensible things.
Yep.
Somewhere between saying Trump is solely responsible for it and Trump had nothing to do with it, I think is an awful lot of territory. And using language like, hey, what he says pretty consistently is at least in some way contributory. Now, what else is contributory to it? Can we get to where? And I think it's often just this. I don't know if it's a search for simple answers, and if we could just fix this one thing, then we'll be farting through silk by Christmas time. But I mean, it's just to me it seems childish, to get that simplistic. And I'm happy to say, yeah, he's on the hook for some of this, but who else is on the hook? And what else is going on? And importantly, what is your side doing other than just yelling about what they're doing?
Yeah. If Trump is going to be an asshole to people, then how does being an asshole to Trump, or being an asshole about Trump, or being an asshole to people who like Trump, how is that going to make people, if your goal is to make people like Trump less, and if the goal is to take down Trump, then how is antagonizing people going to help when trying to be more open to them, like what Daryl Davis does, for example, is going to make it easier. It's going to make it a smaller challenge. Like if you can be open, if if a progressive or a liberal can be more open-minded to a conservative perspective, then they can get it's easier to get those people on their side. And then, like, if your goal is to take down Trump or something like that, then it can mean that you're united against Trump instead of being united against Trump and conservatives and Republicans, or even trying to understand why Trump is an asshole but not evil can try to help with that too, I think.
Yeah. And a couple things on that. I don't think Trump is going to surprise anyone anymore. If you continue to be outraged by him, I understand it, but what were you expecting?
Yeah.
And so, I mean, that's just one thing, and just kind of to, part of wisdom, I think, is approaching the world as it actually is, not as you wish it were, but then get to work and try to create the world. And so I'm thinking of, when you mentioned Daryl Davis, I think he is as good an example of the Buckminster Fuller quote, right? That you don't change things by directly confronting it. You change it by creating a superior model that makes the old way obsolete.
For sure.
And I think Daryl Davis, like how well he embodies that, what he's done, and just the assumptions that he challenged about actually how to get people out of the KKK, how to win them over.
And he's done that too by befriending them.
It's brilliant, and it's brilliant. And so, do you want to be right, or do you want to be Daryl Davis? I think we ought to reflect on that. And I get it there, but so there's this thing I brought up to Hunter, a long time ago, that the research. I don't know if we had this ever came up, but there's the question on the table, and most people go in a particular direction on this. When I ask, what do you suppose is the most viral emotion? Which emotional state gets the most likes, reposts, etc.? And what do most people say?
It's anger or outrage.
Right. Fear, any of those, right?
Yeah.
And yes, there's really good evidence for that. And yes, they are quite viral. There's only one emotion that outpaces them. Have you heard this?
Is it awe?
It's awe.
Yeah.
And so Daryl Davis, I mean, that's the main emotion I have when I hear the Daryl Davis story. And that is, I mean, that is quite literally awesome. That is boatloads. That is one big bowl of awe.
Yeah.
And so how do we just create more awe? We have a senatorial candidate who I think is wonderful. He's not going to get elected, I don't think, because he's in Texas, and he's running against Ted Cruz. And I don't know how much you know about Ted Cruz, but even most Republicans hate Ted Cruz because he is opportunism personified. Okay. But this guy Beto O'Rourke is just so positive, and reporters all the time try to get him snared in some kind of snarky comment about the opposition. And he said, well, I could do that, but then that's going to cut into my time to get my message out. And he's just so, he doesn't, he's not shy about confronting the issues, but he's so affirmative in what he's about, and putting together this really positive vision. And I think he really kind of gets this notion that awe is even more powerful than rage. And I just think I want to support more and more people who get that. I really wish he would win. It would take some kind of miracle for him too. I don't think it's going to happen, unfortunately. But he's going to be on the scene for a while now, and and that can be, it's just a smarter approach. Just by fact now that it's so different, I think makes it makes it a smarter approach, but it also is humans love sharing moments of awe. There's something about awe that's very attractive. I think it's got to be tied with, it's a cousin to heights, emotion, elevation,
Yeah.
but I think stuff that points in that direction can still be very real. It can still be very much dealing with the problems of the world and everything, but I think in a much more adaptive way.
Yeah, I think that can definitely, I think, lead much more effectively to a better place. And if you think about times when your emotional reasoning has been hijacked by anger or fear, and you think about and you compare that to times when your emotional reasoning has been hijacked by awe or inspiration rather, or enlightenment or something like that, they feel at least equally powerful. And one of those, like the awe or the inspiration or enlightenment, one of those can kind of make you tribal in a good way. Like, it can make you tribal about trying to spread a positive message and trying to make people feel better by experiencing this awe, rather than this other kind of tribalism where it encourages you to just demonize people on the other side and attack them rather than trying to spread awe.
Yeah, so there's something there that I think is really important. And a woman named Barbara Fredrickson did some really great work on what the effect of the emotions are, on particularly like on productivity, creativity, etc. And she says the negative emotions, and we're kind of hinting at it here, the negative emotions narrow and impel. They narrow options. You're less likely to go, oh, what are the 5 things I could be thinking with now? Particularly rage tends to point you in just this, like, here's the answer. Here's the one thing you need to do now,
Yeah.
Whereas the positive emotions, which would include awe and elevation and everything, tend to broaden options and then build upon them. And so broaden and build is kind of the name of her theory. And I think when you see those moments of awe, I would even say maybe you're less likely to worry too much about sharing that only with your people. And maybe I think there is an expansiveness to awe and to elevation, to all those things. I think it does take you out of your ego for a moment, and hopefully awe actually lead to you reconsidering, hey, maybe I could that guy I've been battling with so much on Twitter, maybe I could share this with him.
Yeah.
And maybe that wouldn't be the worst thing in the world.
Yeah. A good example of that I've thought about is our friend Ed Kennedy. He was like my personal first experience with him was us arguing with each other on Twitter. And he also of course would argue with Hunter a lot on Twitter. And then
I think he's wonderful.
Yeah.
I just dig. I'm so with you.
Yeah.
My first exposure to him was his YouTube clips. Who's this Hunter Matz guy? It's just stupid. It's just what, and I just remember thinking, man, that's fascinating, but who the hell is this guy? And I remember one, there was some MMA chat we were doing, and I don't make them as often as I'd like to. I just, I've got too much going on sometimes, but there was something we were doing. I thought, we should invite Ed to this. And I sent him a quick note, and he came. And
was that the first Mixed Mental Arts chat?
I don't know if it was the first one, but it was one where I just remembered thinking, it'd be kind of cool to get Ed in on this. And I don't know what had already happened or whatever, or I don't know, or maybe I was just being, look, I'm an innovation guy. I try weird shit all the time, but just, I don't want to go with my first reaction to someone if I'm being super reactive, and therefore my reaction is super simplistic. And if I ever sense myself just writing someone off, I want to slow think that. I want to go back, and now I'm going to get word nerdy on you, Andrew, and it's think of what the word respect means.
Mm-hmm.
So really break it down into its two parts, right? So again, spect, view.
Oh, yeah, that makes sense.
So look at something a second time, or maybe even a third time, maybe even a fourth time, whatever. But you respect someone, or you respect a body of thought if you don't merely react, and you actually go, okay, I've got my reaction out of the way. How about I view this again, and just slow it down a little, and try to see if I was wrong, or if there's just a better approach to it.
Yeah, for sure.
So I think I every now and again I love getting into etymology on important words.
Yeah,
and I think respect is one of those.
that is a great way of looking at that. I like etymology like that too. Yeah, and the thing I like about like my experience with my interactions with Ed, and just his experience with other people in mixed mental arts in general, is that here's this guy who is really not on the side of Hunter Motts, but Hunter and you other people who were participating in that first chat were open-minded enough to talk to him, and he was open-minded enough to talk to all of you guys too.
Absolutely.
In particular Hunter. And so like then once he participated in some of the mixed mental arts chats, I had this idea to invite him onto my podcast to talk with him and Hayden, who's my Christian friend, about religion. And then since now we've done that several times, and now he's not as angry as he used to be. There's nothing wrong with being angry per se, and I think it's entertaining when he still does that sometimes. And I don't have a problem. I don't have a problem with it, but I really value his perspective too, like you were saying.
I even got frustrated a little on this one we did with the four of us a little while ago.
Yeah.
And I was just like, quit going to the straw man, Ed. Come on, you're better than that.
Yeah.
But he can as easily point out holes in my game as well, which is great. And I just have to say, we haven't gotten together yet. He's just in the city. He's just in New York, and I'm out here in the wilds of New Jersey. But sometime we'll get a hold, and we'll go out and we'll have dinner in the city. And
awesome.
And I really look forward to that. And there is something really inspiring about that to me. There's something really cool about. There's something awesome about taking an opponent and letting them even keep, maybe even most of their views and everything, but actually setting conditions so you can have some kind of productive conversation.
Yeah.
And I think that's tremendous. And so what you've done with him, I have just absolutely enjoyed. I really look forward to speaking with him anytime. And I think it's just kind of testament to, I mean, that is, you have it's in the same spirit as Daryl Davis. I mean, I don't want to go too far with that. I mean, he's not. I don't see him as morally reprehensible or anything like that.
Yeah.
But it's just that notion of let's think about how we define, how we identify different roles, and can we disagree with someone without them being an enemy? Can we just have different ideas and find some value in that? I just think it's really helpful. So yeah, I'm glad that Ed has found some value by engaging with some of us. I think he's enjoyed it.
Yeah, I think so too. Yeah, like that's one of the things that I like about him. Like he's really interested in discussing and sometimes like really intensely even debating ideas, especially if he really disagrees with them too. Like he's not he's not the kind of person generally. I mean, sometimes he does say dismissive things about a particular view or group of people or something like that. But if people want to question him about it, then he'll get into a conversation about it. He won't just like ignore and dismiss everyone and not listen to anyone or anything like that.
I think he walks his talk rather well. I really got to give him kudos. That must have been. I mean, even that first time coming into the MMA chat had to be weird for him, and yeah, he has taken kind of a weird chance on that, and
yeah.
But this is. I mean, I see stuff like this, and I go, look, we can figure this out. We can engage people with whom we disagree. We cannot be so reactive. We cannot be so simplistic and reductive. You use the word dismissive. You know, there's some value in acknowledging and even seeking further evidence of the other person's humanity, and that's. And you know, look, I'm an old guy now, so I'm getting increasingly sappy, sentimental, and it's just horrible. You know, it's just. but it warms my heart, man. I dig seeing stuff like this, and I think I guess I would love to do everything I can to make awe just a much more common experience online for people.
Yeah.
I think we're not paying enough attention to how we can bring awe into the picture, and there's some real value in there. Again, it's this expansiveness, this getting past ourself, this it's still emotion. You're right, but it doesn't feel so. One of the terms, you know, physiologically, neurologically, what happens when you feel anger in particular is you know, the term is the amygdala hijack, right? So your amygdala just kind of bogarts all the resources, you know, and the prefrontal cortex kind of takes a nap. And the idea is to feel the feelings, but then breathe, rest, and let the prefrontal cortex back in. And, you know, I will say this, even as I left a particular denomination and everything, there's still certain passages from the Bible and even from some of the things that Joseph Smith wrote that I still find value in. And one is, I can't remember now whether it's in the Old Testament. I don't know if it's Ecclesiastes or anything, but the idea is make war with a multitude of counselors. And I think, you know, let your amygdala be a counselor, let your whole brain be a counselor, and get the advice, let them weigh in, but let's let, you know, Big Daddy prefrontal cortex back in to make the final decision.
Oh, that's a great metaphor.
Yeah. And it's the seat of executive function. I mean, it's what we get to do that no other life form can. And so not to take advantage of it seems to be kind of a waste.
Yeah, totally. Yeah.
You know?
I'm glad that you mentioned the internet briefly there, because I was just thinking a few minutes ago about how the internet is a form of innovation. It's like a Molotov cocktail, and it like you like you were saying there, it's a double-edged sword. People can reasonably argue that it's bad for people because it can be really easy to just get hijacked by your confirmation bias and then just go into these segregated groups online where, oh, you're a flat earther, I'm a flat earther too, let's just hate those round earther guys. And but then it can also be a place where there are things like podcasts that happen, and yeah, there's still lots of, exactly, there's still lots of people who make videos that get lots of clicks because they're like, I don't know, like Ben Shapiro destroys this guy or something like that.
But it's so dumb.
Yeah. But then there are so many other conversations like Joe Rogan's podcast, which I love, and like Mixed Mental Arts, which, inspired me to start my own YouTube channel, and inspired other people too, like Hayden Bruce, and has led to so many great conversations myself. There are these long form discussions where people are trying to understand each other's opinions and figure out different ideas together. So that's the positive edge of the internet.
That's absolutely, and there's no valence to any technology. Fire cooks great meals and it burns down homes.
Yeah.
Cars get us where we need to be, and then also kill a certain percentage of us.
I was just thinking last night about how broccoli can kill you, because I was chewing a piece of broccoli and I realized it was a little undercooked and I could have choked and died on broccoli.
There you are. And so we just need to be conscious about it. And whenever I hear people blaming the internet for something, I just go, oh man, you're going to offload human responsibility onto a technology? Come on. Now, are there certain facets or certain features of the internet that it's kind of like this part of behavioral science? Like, are you familiar at all with like Richard Thaler and Cass Sunstein? They wrote a book called Nudge.
No, I think I've heard of that book, but I haven't read it.
Yeah, but it's the idea that through research you can figure out that some choices really are better. Some choices lead to better health, lead to better financial health, whatever it is, and you can actually it's called choice architecture. You can set up choices in a way so people still have their freedom, but now it's set up in a way where they're more likely to choose the smarter, the better alternative.
Oh, okay.
And yeah, and we just kind of need to be thinking about that at all. Our automatic, our system one, the automaticity in there and everything, that serves us fine for the super majority of decisions we make, because they're small and the stakes are really low, and a certain degree of routinization is fine, and that's great. It's actually how we can live. If we had to put full attention to every small decision we have to make, we'd never get anything done. But again, we just need to be aware of conditions and what our default mode is, and then just more often ask ourselves, am I cool with my default mode just taking care of that? Or should I be more thoughtful about that?
Yeah, exactly. For sure. Yeah, that seems like a much more beneficial approach. And I like the idea of applying that to technology for sure. That sounds like it would be a really beneficial thing to do. Were there
it's just simply going like, and it's great because it can set you on kind of a path of inquiry here. What are the conditions under which the internet is more likely to lead to bad outcomes? What are the conditions under which it's more likely to lead to good outcomes? Who are you with when it goes south? Who are you with when it doesn't go south? Yeah, you can start thinking about this, and you can be reflective on some of this. Are there things that we can do, again, to kind of create some choice architecture for the internet? Yeah, I trust that we can get there. I believe that we can get to a better place that still gives people their freedom, but increases the odds that they'll make a choice that is will be healthier. And I know that sounds so paternal, that sounds so big brother and everything, but to ignore our default mode, to imagine that our default mode is somehow neutral, and as fully expansively human as we'd like it to be, I think that's ignorant. we know better. And our default mode is small, and it's contracted, and it's peevish, and it's reactive, and it loves picking fights, and it's dumb. And so I think everyone needs to be aware of kind of what the choices are here, And then there is enough of a small L libertarian streak in me that I want people to be able to make choices that make sense to them, but I also want them to be a little more reflective. And I want them, I guess, maybe more than anything, I want them to have access to the kind of information that will put them on a path to greater consciousness, greater expansiveness, greater humanity. I don't know. We are the world. We are the children. Yes. We are the ones who seek a better day. So let's start living.
We're all one, man.
This has been the Kumbaya Fest podcast.
Yeah. Yeah. I try to spread that message of awe and enlightenment and that kind of stuff as much as I can.
We are I determined that you have a certain set of friends here. We're kind of the hippies of the mixed mental arts outpost here or something.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. Yeah, that's why I like that's one of the large reasons that I like participating in the mixed mental arts chats so much, because I identify so much with our friend Dusty in that way. He's trying to spread that positive message.
Isn't he great? I dig Dusty. Yeah. He's another one. I mean, he's just down the road from me. You know, he's about 4 hours away. I gotta get down to DC and hang out with Dusty. He's a good dude.
Yeah, he's a great guy. Yeah, I really always enjoy talking with him, and he, like, every week pretty much I learn something from him, I would say, about some particular perspective that I hadn't considered. And he just he has a really similar mindset and approach to life as I have, and really similar interests too. Like, we're both reading, I just coincidentally started reading this Wheel of Time fantasy series that he had read before, and then he started reading it again, so we're both reading it at the same time, and it's really fun.
That's cool. Is that Pullman?
No, it's Robert Jordan.
Well, Jordan. Oh, yeah, that's right.
Were you thinking of the Golden Compass?
Yeah, I was thinking the Golden Compass.
Yeah.
So my everyone in my family but me is like a major sci-fi and fantasy nerd, and I was as a kid, but for whatever reason, I don't know what it is. I think it shows a little lack of imagination on my part. I read about 4 novels a year.
Oh, wow.
And then about 40 nonfiction books.
I usually try to keep it about half and half. Like, I read a nonfiction and then a fiction and then a nonfiction.
I think that's probably wiser. You know, the research that shows that like good fiction, not just like trash, but like thoughtful literary fiction actually increases your empathy. It actually,
like The Handmaid's Tale that I just read.
Yeah.
That is actually an amazing book.
The psychological term is theory of mind.
Yeah.
But literary fiction is actually really great at helping you develop theory of mind and empathy for other people, because now you can, where the characters are actually developed well, and you can actually identify them as a human, and not like in so much bad fiction, it's kind of go, nobody talks that way, nobody acts like that. What are you doing? That's just I don't know anyone who would have responded like that. What are you doing?
Yeah.
You know. So yeah, there's some real value to it, and there is some really great fiction that I've really enjoyed, and I don't have a good answer for why I don't read more, and I just need to do it. I think it's probably, at this point, it's probably just habitual, and it's just easier. What will happen is I'll get a novel and I'll start reading it, and then someone will make mention of a nonfiction book, and I go, oh, that sounds so great, and I'll get distracted and I'll go in on it.
Yeah.
And I'm usually reading 3 or 4 books at the same time, anyhow. So.
Yeah, I'm usually reading at least 2 at the same time, I would say.
Yeah, it's bad. Well, hey, I just wanted to give you one more thought. So even though I've extracted myself from Mormonism, there's at least one idea that I think Joseph Smith got down pretty well. And I go, well, hey, even a broken clock is right twice a day, right? So yeah. He had this thing about how power and authority are wielded that I haven't heard maybe it's just it still sticks with me because I grew up with it and everything. But I think it's rather insightful. So let me give this to you. I won't do it verbatim, but I'll kind of paraphrase. But he says, so Joseph Smith, founder of the Mormon Church, this tremendous, imaginative, extremely creative dude, which it's fair to ask whether those are the qualities you want in a religious leader or not. He said, so this is supposedly the word of the Lord. This is not Joseph Smith, but what God told him to write, of course, right? So he says, we've learned by sad experience that is the nature and disposition of almost all men. As soon as they get a little authority, as they suppose, they will immediately begin to exercise unrighteous dominion. So if you get authority, you're going to start exercising unrighteous dominion. Hence, many are called, but few are chosen. No power, I'm going to paraphrase here some, just to make it for clarity. It says, no power or influence can or ought to be maintained when you're in a position of authority, only by persuasion, by long suffering, by gentleness and meekness, and by love unfeigned. By kindness and pure knowledge, we shall greatly enlarge the soul without hypocrisy and without guile. Reproving people or correcting people sometimes with sharpness, when moved upon by the Holy Ghost, and then showing forth afterwards an increase of love toward him who you've corrected, lest he esteem you to be his enemy. And so the thought there is sharpness isn't meanness, but specificity. Like if someone screws up, you don't call them a bad person. You say, hey, this one thing you did, we got to talk about it. But then right after that, after you've corrected them, you show them even more love and everything to make it really clear that you're not their enemy, you're still on their side and anything. But be full of charity towards all people, and let virtue garnish your thoughts unceasingly. Then shall your confidence wax strong. And just this better approach will distill upon your soul as the dews from heaven, just as the dew settles on grass in the morning. I just think that's such a lovely passage.
It
talks about when you're in a position of authority or power, you need to be careful, because it's kind of like, when Hunter and Brian had Dacker Keltner on, he was talking about, the two insights about power from his research were that power will decrease empathy and will increase impulsivity. And that's just human. We're going to do that unless we're conscious about this. And I think something like this, hey, when you're in that kind of position, know that you're going to start exercising unrighteous dominion pretty quickly, unless you do some of these other things. So I feel that's something that still helps me a lot. I think it fits in very much with this notion that our default mode probably isn't that smart. We should be reflective a little bit more. But anyhow, there you go. One gem from Mormonism.
Yeah. No, that's great. I love that. That makes a lot of sense. Yeah. So was there anything else you wanted to talk about?
So the language came to me early. It's language that came to me a few years ago, but I see it really reflected in what you're doing here. And it's something that, along with awe, I would love to create conditions so that more people were attracted to and would also experience themselves moral imagination and will. And that is like, you're what? You're a quarter of the way through your experience here on the earth, hopefully.
I'm 29.
Yeah. Well, hey, maybe you make it to 120. We'll see.
Awesome.
You probably will. You probably will. So. I joked that I'm just going to miss out on the singularity by 3 years or something. All my kids will live forever. I'll be the last generation to miss out on that. But at a certain point, it seems like it's helpful for us all to kind of draw some conclusions about what we're, it's like that saying, the two most important days are when you're born, the day you're born, and the day you figure out why.
Right.
And I think just really like, what is the better life? I mean, these are just classic. This is just basic philosophy. This is where like so much of it started, right? Like, what is the good life? And Plato talks about the good, the true, and the beautiful. And someone has suggested that if you're going to mess with Plato, you probably shouldn't. But if you're going to add one thing, it could probably be something like the heroic. So good, the true, the beautiful, and the heroic. And can we be thoughtful about bringing out the good, the true, the beautiful, and the heroic in ourselves and in others more? And if we do so, that's probably a better way to get through this world thing.
Yeah, I would say so. Yeah, that's great. I like the idea of pursuing all of those virtues. Because a lot of people, a lot of the times, people try to focus on one or the other, or just one or two, rather than all of those. And I think all of those together is a great idea.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I personally myself, I love seeing that. Whenever I see it happening, I try not to take it for granted. It isn't a given. I mean, there unfortunately there are probably too many people who make it through life without experiencing much, if any, of that.
Yeah.
And I want a world where that scenario is increasingly unlikely.
Yeah. Yeah, me too. Yeah. So
I think you're doing great work here, man. I think kind of your basis in philosophy. I think you're displaying regularly moral imagination and will. I think it's both parts. It's being able to imagine a better thing, but then taking action on it and actually doing it.
thanks a lot, man. I really appreciate that.
Absolutely, brother. I'm tickled anytime you want to have this kind of conversation, because I think we need more of it. I think we need to get more of it out there. I think it's helpful to get more people interested in doing the same and themselves having these kinds of conversations.
Yeah, exactly. And yeah, like just like I kind of expected, the at first we were like, about the idea I had in my head was to talk about Mormonism, but then we talked about so many other related subjects too, which is awesome. That's the way like mixing the mental arts should work, and it can help you have more and more mindgasms.
Well, that's it. And I think it's just an acknowledgement that we've talked so much Buddhism and Zen and everything, but it is all connected. It is the holistic approach is adaptive for some obvious reasons. I think it's just a better map.
Yeah.
It's closer to whatever reality is.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. Yeah. Well, yeah, I think we can end here now, unless there's anything else that you can think of to talk about. I think I'm out of ideas for now.
I'm good, brother. Well, no, I'm never out of ideas. That's never the metric. Again, it's the undiagnosed ADHD thing.
Right.
I'm not sure much else I could offer now would make much sense, but I appreciate it, man. This was good. Keep it up, and always know I'm here to jump in whenever you think that would be helpful.
Awesome, man. Yeah, I really appreciate that. Like I said on Facebook a few weeks ago, I think I consider you a mentor, because you're a really good example to follow of the way that someone can live their life and interact with other people. And you're one of many people that I try to emulate in that respect. And I really value being able to communicate with you, and you being so open to talking with me all the time. And it helps me feel better about what I'm trying to do, and helps give me hope for the future, I would say.
Oh, right on, man. And I hope it's clear that the mentorship is not a question of age or anything like that. I certainly learn a lot from you, both by specific things you say as well as your example, which I think is every bit as important here also. So it's I've never been one to, I mean, I don't know, I'm just weird in any number of ways. But my friendships, I have friends who are, my friends go from age 20 to age 85. I mean, it's
Oh,
just,
wow.
it doesn't, there are interesting people that for me, that's, it's not particulars of age or occupation or race or religion or anything. If I do discriminate, which I think we all do to some extent, I discriminate on, is this a good, interesting person? And if I can satisfy myself, the answer is yes to both of those, then I'm more likely to say, yeah, let's get into it. Let's check it out. But I mean, good, you know, life is too short not to spend too much time with, you know, people who aren't really all that good, you know?
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. Well, thanks a lot, man. Yeah. I mean, I try to always be that way, to set a good example. And I mean, obviously I make mistakes all the time, because everyone does. But
Oh, of
yeah,
course.
everyone can always improve too. And they're always great, lots of great and interesting and good people to talk with, I think, like, especially all the people that we've talked to through mixed mental arts and everything like that. But yeah,
Right on, brother.
again, thanks so much for talking with me. And I'll just say all the things that I like to say at the end of my videos there, and then you can give any of your plugs and whatnot, and
Oh, cool.
I'll add the links to my video here, like I did the last time, of your podcast and everything.
Cool.
So yeah, thanks so much to everyone who's been watching. Hope you enjoyed watching this conversation and listening to it as much as I enjoyed having it. And thank you so much to everyone who likes this video and who has subscribed to my channel and who's contributed to me on Patreon. And thank you so fucking much to anyone else who subscribes to my channel or likes this video or contributes to me on Patreon. I really appreciate it, and it helps me out a lot and allows me to do more exciting and interesting stuff like this. And like I always say, I love you all. Keep being the tiny beam of light that shines through the almost impenetrable darkness in the universe. And always remember this: the funk cures all.
The
And
funk cures all.
yes, and keep having mindgasms, everyone. All right. Got any plugs there, Adam?
If you're at all inclined, the book is called Outsmart Your Instincts: How the Behavioral Innovation Approach Drives Your Company Forward. It's something I've had my mind wrapped around for about 10, 12 years now. It's an overall pursuit that I'm going to stay on. There's still 4 or 5 big questions I have, puzzling that not a big enough dent has been put in any of them yet. So I've got at least 15 years of work to do here, and I trust that along the way I'm probably going to discover some other things that I need to work on as well. So
what sort of questions?
Well, I'll just give you one example. It's going to be one of the, and I think maybe we've spoken about this before some, but in a business sense, but also I think maybe overall in life, it's so much easier to get freaked out by risks of commission than those of omission.
Oh, yeah.
And when you look at what takes companies down, I think I can make the case that at least some of the biggest examples, Kodak, BlackBerry, Research in Motion, Nokia, Gateway Computers. I think maybe even I'd worry about Dell now as well. So you can go on and simply ask the question, was it risk? Were the greater risks there risks of commission or omission? And we focus on risks of commission because you actually put numbers to it, so they're easier to think about. It's hard to quantify what you don't do, but yet we know that it's risks of omission. Kodak didn't fail because they did too much with digital. They failed because they didn't do nearly enough with digital.
Right.
the end of life research shows that among the biggest regrets people have are not the things they did, but the things they didn't do.
Yeah. And I think something like not spending enough time with your family and stuff like that.
Precisely.
Right?
Yeah. Just not to. Some of this research has been done. We ought to, learn from it and incorporate it. And so I want to figure out how businesses can have a more productive risk of omission conversation, because I think that's huge, and I think that's where most companies are messing up. They're not trying nearly enough.
Yeah, that's a really good point.
I'm a geek. Yeah. I think about this stuff.
No, that's worth thinking about for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. Sorry, I interrupted you when you were
no, that's it.
Talking about
Outsmart Your Instincts.
Stuff. Yeah.
Got a podcast called Outsmart Your Instincts as well. That's it for me. The name of my company is Ideas to Go. If you want to go and check out our website at any time, you can kind of see what we're up to. Yeah, I think that's good for the moment. Good, sir.
All right. Well, yeah, thanks again so much for talking, man. I always really enjoy these and I really appreciate it. And it was really fascinating to hear about your experiences with Mormonism and learn about them.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right.
Thanks so much.
So, yeah. Thanks so much. And thanks to everyone for watching. And adios until next time. Keep having Mindgasms.
Right on.